You must feel the force around you, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere, even between the land and the ship. That iconic quote comes to us from Star Wars when Yoda was teaching Luke how to use the Force. Today, I would like to talk about spiritualism and spiritual religions and philosophies. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds. The breakdown of today's topic is, what is a spiritualistic religion? And how important is philosophy in that spiritualistic religion? And looking at some historical examples of philosophy from our world. Then I'll discuss Godhead and a spiritualistic religion. Should you include a Godhead? What do people pray to? And finally, I will give you some steps for creating your own fantasy philosophy based on the tenets of real-world philosophies. If you like this kind of content, please do hit the thumbs up button below. And if you really like this video, I do have a Ko-fi account, kofi.com/justintimeworlds, where you can buy me a cup of coffee for €1. Okay, let's get cracking. What is a spiritualistic religion? A spiritualistic religion is one where the focus is on the journey that the practitioner takes rather than on the worship of a specific Godhead. The principles around a spiritualistic religion is that you are striving to attain a state of being rather than providing worship to a Godhead. The emphasis of a spiritualistic religion is on that journey. The connection between people and the connection of that journey and traveling that journey provides you with more and more internal serenity and, in some cases, power. These are the principles of the Jedi and the Sith religion. They're both the same sides of the coin, the Jedi religion being based around controlling your emotions and feeling the flow of the Force and the creative energy of the Force. The Sith religion, on the other hand, being the journey of feeling your emotions and drawing power from your emotions and projecting that emotion out through the Force. So in a spiritualistic religion, you go on a journey of discovery, and that journey of discovery builds into power. But now remember, religions speak to the social contract. They mediate the social contract and give you a sense of place. So if there is no Godhead to hand down strictures and forbidden practices and punishments, how does a spiritualistic religion address that societal contract pressure? It addresses it through philosophy. So if you're going to build a spiritualistic religion, you need to include a lot of navel-gazing philosophy. And the reason why is because that philosophy becomes your only mediation of your social contract through the religion. If we look at some examples from our own history in terms of philosophy, I'm going to take two Greek philosophies that are opposing schools. Now, they aren't strictly speaking spiritualistic religions, but they do speak to philosophy acting as a mediating influence on the social contract. So on the one hand, we have Stoicism. The central principle of Stoicism is self-control. The writings of Marcus Aurelius speak to doing your job as a human and to exercising self-discipline, to loving your fate and not trying to control that which you cannot control, but instead to accept it and to control only what you can control, which is to say, to control your reaction to what has happened to you. On the other hand, we have the philosophy of Epicurus, also from the Greeks. Now, Epicurus said that life is fleeting and you must take whatever pleasure you can from it in moderation so that pleasure doesn't turn into unpleasant feelings. So Epicurus would never have advocated getting so drunk that you get a hangover, because that wouldn't be in keeping with his principles of moderation. But he does speak about, live today and take the pleasure you can, because tomorrow we might all be dead. And this was taken to the most extreme form by one of the Epicurean disciples, who threw himself a lavish death party every day, which is just the most epic celebration of life I've ever heard of. Speaking of moderation, another philosophy that you might want to look into when you're building a philosophy is the Eightfold Path of the Buddha. Now, the Buddha also advocated moderation. He went from the extreme pleasure of living in a palace, completely isolated from the devastation of real world, to the other extreme of living as an ascetic without enough food. And between those two, he came up with the writings of Buddhism, which is moderation in all things leads to enlightenment. So you can see that there are different philosophies that you can adapt to your fantasy religion, taking some of their principles and their tenets and building that into your philosophy in order for that philosophy to mediate the social contract of your world. What is your favorite philosophy? Let me know in the comments below, and if it's a fantasy philosophy, bonus points for you. So I've mentioned Buddhism, and in Buddhism people do pray. So we've spoken about spiritualism being a journey. That being so, why do people pray? Should you include a godhead in a fantasy religion based on spiritualism? The answer to that question is you can, but you have to be careful. You can't have a godhead that is jealous or very involved when the emphasis is not on the godhead. The emphasis is not on worship. The emphasis is on the journey. Now, in Buddhism, the prayers are offered to ancestors who have reached nirvana and can therefore guide you on your journey. So that's a good way to go. If you have a reincarnation-based cosmology especially, people are reincarnated. Some people manage to break the cycle by reaching a state of enlightenment, and those ancestors are then worshipped as guides more than as gods. You also have the potential for, say, uninvolved creator spirits who don't really care about the people. So they've put in place a cosmology and they're kind of there, but they don't really get very involved at all. You have to remember here, it's the journey, not the worship. So clearly that journey is guided by the philosophy, and the philosophy is the central tenet that you're going to have to design around a spiritualistic religion. So let's talk about how to design a philosophy. The first thing you need to do is you need to pick your core principle. So what I mean by that is something like Stoicism's self-discipline, or Epicurus's enjoyment of life, or Buddhism's moderation, or Confucius and knowing your place in the societal pecking order. Those things are your core principle that informs your philosophy. You get bonus points if you define two core philosophies that are in opposition with each other and create two schools of thought on the spiritual journey that are in opposition to each other, a la the Sith and the Jedi. Based on those core philosophies, build out 3 to 8 tenets that form the backbone of your religion. Remember, this is the stuff that really speaks to the mediation of the social contract. And it is going to be critical that people understand these principles. Not only that they understand it, but also that there are some quotes around it that they will use in everyday life. Examples of this from Stoicism is you cannot control what happens to you, only how you react to it. From Epicurus comes eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may be dead. And from Buddhism comes do not dwell on the past, do not dream on the future, focus on the here and now. So you can see that these tenets are really the core structure of that mediation of the social contract. Decide what your church looks like. So your church is unlikely to be a superstructure like the Roman Catholic Church or even the polytheistic churches of the Romans and the Greeks. And the reason why is because spiritualism, being more about the journey, allows for much more scope of deviation without it coming to blows. People can agree to disagree when it's about the journey. Of course, that isn't always the case. The Jedi and the Sith certainly were engaged in a religious conflict. Don't discount it completely, but it is probably going to be different schools that don't necessarily come to blows but do have conflict. Bonus world building points if you design two schools that do have conflict with each other. It doesn't have to be up to the level of war. It can just be debates in the marketplace, as it was between Epicureans and Stoics. The religion probably has some form of monks or ascetics. Spiritualism seems to attract that kind of structure. And it probably also has some form of priest or teacher class. Though they might not be called priests, they might be called Jedi Knights or Jedi Masters or Sith Lords. But those are what amounts to the priests of the Force religion. Finally, you want to decide whether there is something that people pray to or whether they just spend their time navel-gazing in meditation. You can spend a lot of time navel-gazing and you can get a lot of benefit out of meditating, but maybe you do want to include some form of guiding spirit, or maybe you want to mix spiritualism with animism, which is where spirits live in place. And so the two coexist quite well, because then you can have guidance offered by spirits that live in the world, and you can have the spiritualistic religion speak to the transcendence and the social contract. And if you want to know more about animism, then check out my video on the topic over there. That is how you build a philosophy. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please do hit the like button, comment down below, let me know. And if you really enjoyed it, head on over to ko-fi.com/justintimeworlds and buy me a cup of coffee. I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time Worlds.